Welcome to the top 10 games I, Master Conniff, played in 2019. It was a year of video games for me. All years prior, I'd say that board games sat on the throne of my pastime entertainment, but not this year. And man, what a year it was. I've played a lot of fantastic titles, and some that I honestly never would have even tried had it not been for friends or other YouTube channels I started following this year. In other words, I owe a lot of my experiences this year to people, whether those I know personally or those I've only ever interacted with online. And after all, isn't that what it's all about? Someone may come along and say they only play single-player games, and that's perfectly reasonable, but I bet that they seek out what other people think about those single-player games, whether on Reddit or YouTube. You see, community drives the video game industry, and that's why I've created a Discord community centered around the respectful mutual love of the games that we spend our time playing. You can join that server at the link in the description of this video. Oh, and I'm sincere about the community aspect of gaming, board game or otherwise. I don't want my Discord community plug to come across as disingenuous. It really is the people and their stories that make the video game industry what it is. And ultimately, that's what drives developers to continue making the games we love. Anyway, let's move on to the main event, my 2019 top 10 list. I've got 3 little notes, caveats, rules, what have you, to this list, and I think it's prudent that I mention them. First, these aren't all games I have only played in 2019. Rather, these are games that I spent time playing in 2019. Whether I first played them many years ago or started them up just a few months ago, these are games that have stood out above the rest this year and provided an endearing and rewarding experience. Second, my methods for ranking these games are based on a snapshot in time of when I made this list. What that means is that if in January of 2019 I felt a particular way about a game, that doesn't necessarily mean I remember that and feel the same now. As such, the rankings are based on how I currently feel towards the game, far more subjective than objective. And finally, remember, this is my opinion and my opinion alone. If you think a game on this list is the greatest thing since Jimi Hendrix's Star Spangled Banner performance at Woodstock, and if you think that Steve Vai's version that he played at a baseball game is miles better, anyway, that's fine. That doesn't mean I agree with you. However, every game on this list is exceptional in my book. Some might just be a little more exceptional than others. First, the honorable mentions. I've got 2 of these, and they are Halo, the Master Chief Collection, and Shovel Knight. Now, I'm no stranger to Halo. I was there for Combat Evolved, cut my teeth on Halo 2, and have played every main game since, well, except Halo 5. I've played Halo Reach, ODST, and I even dabbled in Halo Wars, though briefly. The Master Chief Collection gets an honorable mention because it reminded me of just how fun it can be to jump into a quick multiplayer match with friends and shoot each other. For the price of 1 game, you get 5 complete Halo titles. That's fantastic value. And complete means complete. Full story, full multiplayer. It's like a love letter package to the franchise as a whole. The real MVP of the collection, though, is the multiplayer playlists. Simply choose your preferred game mode, which games you'd like to play it in, and get some friends, online or couch friends, and you're good to go. The matchmaking system rotates between the games, so one match you're playing Halo 2 Anniversary Edition, and then the next you could be playing Halo 4, and then the next after that, Halo Reach. It's the most brilliant method of matchmaking I've ever seen in a Grand Collection title. But I suppose having pioneered console matchmaking, I should not expect anything short of excellence. Shovel Knight is probably as opposite from Halo as you can get. It's a 2D side-scrolling adventure platformer. That's a mouthful. It is honestly a lot like the older Mega Man games with boss fights that possess mechanics based on the stage that they are set in. Shovel Knight is not as old as its graphics and design would suggest. It's a 2014 title from Yacht Club Games that plays homage to the games of old with its fun and challenging level design, item collection, and 8-bit soundtrack. It earns this honorable mention because I've actually beaten it twice, once with the titular Shovel Knight and the other with Spectre Knight. You see, Shovel Knight is sort of similar to the Master Chief Collection in that it's actually 3 games in one. At the time of me writing this script, there are 3 different playable knights, each with a surprisingly different story. This means different levels, different areas, and different collectibles, weapons or otherwise. I actually prefer the progression on Shovel Knight more so than Spectre Knight, but I enjoy the story of Spectre Knight more. It's hauntingly sad. With the honorable mentions, well, mentioned, let's get started on the top 10. The newest game on this list, Borderlands 3, was the first-person looter shooter we, as a gaming collective, needed. And by that I mean it was devoid of ridiculous pay-to-play cosmetics and loot boxes. Really, Borderlands 3 is a continuation of what made the Borderlands series so enjoyable to begin with. A gun-looting, cringy, humor-filled, action-packed, class-based first-person shooter spectacular. Anyway, Borderlands 3 had some pretty massive shoes to fill, at least in the regards to the main villain. You see, Handsome Jack is one of the best video game villains of all time, and frankly, the Calypso twins, though villainous, don't quite meet the extremely high bar Handsome Jack set.
Hey kiddo, Jack here, president of Hyperion. Let me explain how things work here. The Vault Hunters show up,
But that's okay. Borderlands 3 still has an enjoyable story, and above all else, enjoyable and fun gameplay. I really enjoy the classes Vault Hunters you can choose from in this game, far more than I did in the pre-sequel. Beastmaster, to me, seems to be the class that they really poured the most time into. Now, that's not to say the others are bad, because they are pretty fun, but overall, Beastmaster is the one I think they had the idea for first, and worked on first. That's just my hunch, and it's hard to explain what I mean. But like I said though, all 4 classes are a lot of fun. My main is the Siren. I never played a Siren in any of the other games, always going for more of the stealth sniper build, so getting used to the more up-close and personal playstyle of Amara was not the easiest thing for me in the world. Oh, and it took me entirely too long to realize I could customize and mix and match different abilities from different skill trees. I actually didn't even realize that until I started a Beastmaster playthrough. Oops. Borderlands 3 earns its spot on this list because of the fun I had playing not only by myself but with people. You see, that's something Borderlands has always done right, provide a fun and engaging multiplayer experience. And at this point, they've kind of perfected it. You can change looting options so everyone gets their own instance of loot. You can also change how enemies scale in a party to make it easier or harder for players of vastly different levels. And you can send mail to other players of weapons and crap you don't want. Borderlands 3 is a fun time, and I look forward to playing it more. There's just one little game on this list that has been sorta stealing the show from Borderlands 3. We'll get to that later. Oh, and here's my final thought on this game, and this isn't really a spoiler, but I am so happy they opened Borderlands 3 with Desert Pandora. Not this snow stuff we got in the second game for, in my opinion, way too long. Actual classic Borderlands 1 vibing desert. I think that really helped me jump right into my enjoyment of this game. The tail end of 2019 may have been consumed by Star Wars with the release of Rise of Skywalker and the completion of the first season of The Mandalorian on Disney+. But the beginning of my 2019 was consumed by a different type of Star Wars, an older type.
We have all but destroyed the Jedi Knights. The old Republic is crippled. They can do nothing to stop us now. But there is one thing standing in our way. One last Jedi who has yet to choose his true role in the galaxy.
Knights of the Old Republic is a legendary game, both in Star Wars history but also in RPG history. It introduced Star Wars fans to Darth Revan, one of the most interesting and cool characters to ever be created. To say that Obsidian had large shoes to fill for the sequel to the best-selling Star Wars RPG of all time would have been an understatement. But, as Obsidian tends to do, they exceeded all expectations, and in the case of Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lords delivered a game every bit as legendary and interesting as the first one. Now, KOTOR 2's release wasn't the smoothest launch in the history of gaming. In fact, it was rushed, a lot of content was left out, and the game was quite buggy. In fact, part of me wanting to play it again after at least 12 years after my initial play is because of one particular bug I encountered on my original Xbox version. Upon leaving the Paragus mining facility, the Ebon Hawk makes its way to a space station above the planet Telos. Long story short, if you make enough bad decisions to tip you as far down the dark side as you can trigger an in-game cutscene the next time you get into the Ebon Hawk, where a particular stowaway reveals herself. The problem was, when I finally did get to the Ebon Hawk after the Telos part was done, it kept me in a perpetual black screen, as if it was going to load the cutscene but then never did. I could actually open up my map and change some things, but nothing helped. Not knowing what to do, I made a new character, female this time, and made all the light-sided decisions. At this point, I was sick and tired of Paragus and the whole opening act of KOTOR 2, so once I beat the game with that character, I moved on and shelved the game. Fast forward to 2019, and I find out that the second KOTOR is in the Xbox store. Well, I had revisited the first game in 2018, so it was time I revisited the second game, and this time gleefully make all the dark side decisions I could on a male character, and experience the game from that perspective. Now, KOTOR 2 is my favorite of the two games. The way the character Kreia was written to deconstruct the entire Star Wars universe with her philosophy is brilliant. She is probably the most interesting character ever written for Star Wars. There is a wonderful YouTube video that I will link in the description of this video that dives deep into her philosophy and her views on the Jedi and Sith. I'd tell you the name of the channel, but it's literally just a period. There's no other name, so a link will have to do. I actually do have one complaint about KOTOR 2 though. The lack of planets you can visit compared to the first game is disappointing. Sure, there's Duxon and Iz's spaceport on Onderon, and you get to see some of Telos and Paragus, and another planet that I won't mention that would spoil the end of the game, but it also has Dantooine and Korriban, again, both of which we already explored in depth in KOTOR 1. And KOTOR 1 also had Manon, Kashyyyk, Tatooine, and Terrace. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the variety in KOTOR 1 really gave me the feeling of grand adventure. KOTOR 2 does have Nar Shaddaa, and well, that leads me into my next point. KOTOR 2 is gritty and thought-provoking. It's not really like the first game where things seem pretty easily black or white. There are a lot of great decisions in KOTOR 2. A big part of that is Kreia's philosophy. But Nar Shaddaa is a great example of this. It's the smuggler's moon above Nal Hutta, so you can imagine the type of seedy individuals it would attract. You can involve yourself in all sorts of side quests, some less morally corrupt than others, but in the end, it really solidifies the concept that KOTOR 2 is about the exile making whatever decisions they see fit. It's not about choosing the high road or the low road, it's about survival. Nar Shaddaa was an excellent choice for the main act of KOTOR 2 to begin in. Despite being a 2004 release, and yes, I still have my original hard copy disc for the OG Xbox, KOTOR 2 is still fun 15 years later. It brings back fond memories of experiencing the story for the first time, but also experiencing some of the best RPG systems that I had ever played at the time, and to think they simply used a modified version of a D&D system for all combat. Here's to hoping that the game continues to live on in another 10 years, and I can revisit it then and reminisce on some of the best Star Wars material to have ever been created. And hopefully, I get the urge to revisit it a bit sooner than 10 years. Who knows? In May of 2018, I had just picked up Elder Scrolls Online at the request of a college friend. We started our adventure in the land of Tamriel together, but due to personal reasons, my friend stopped playing. So there I was with a massive game in front of me and not a clue on how to make sense of it. I was also working a job that was not fulfilling in any way other than a paycheck, so I really needed a solid fantasy escape. Enter the Lore Seekers, an ESO podcast all about the lore of the game, combined with friendly and helpful tips from the two hosts, Jibs and Cash. It took one episode, the Bosmer episode to be exact, and I was hooked. Here were two guys with solid game acumen and a level of maturity and friendliness that I hadn't ever heard from a video game-related podcast. It's easy to see why their podcast has grown into what it is today, arguably the best and most important fan content created about Elder Scrolls Online. Jibs and Cash provided a gaming family, and the Xbox chapter of their community took me in like I had belonged all along. And you see, that's where it took off. Much of what I do today for my own community is because of what I learned being a part of the Lore Seekers community. And that's the legacy of my time in ESO. I don't play the game nearly as much as I used to, but I most certainly still play games with the people I met through that community. As a game, Elder Scrolls Online is probably the best true MMO I've ever played. The lore and depth of story is there. The zones, dungeon, and planes you can explore and adventure in are varied and full of quests, NPCs, and loot. There's all manner of content for all manner of players. If you're more of a questing person, there are quests galore. From stopping an evil Daedric prince to stepping into the legal affairs of high elves on the Isle of Somerset, to assisting with a zoo gone horribly wrong. There's enough content to whet your appetite for years. But maybe questing isn't your thing and you'd rather take on dungeons and challenging boss fights. ESO has that in spades as well. From easy beginner dungeons like Fungal Grotto to challenging DLC dungeons like Frostvault or Depths of Malatar. There's even arena challenges for solo players or groups alike, Maelstrom Arena and Black Rose Prison or Dragonstar Arena respectively. And I can't really mention ESO without talking about my experience with Maelstrom Arena. Those who've played ESO with me know of my time spent there. It's become my claim to fame, really. I completed an achievement that no one in my social circle had managed to complete yet. I beat Maelstrom Arena on veteran difficulty in one sitting without dying. This is a truly challenging achievement and a sort of goal I held on a pedestal my entire time playing the game. Now I wear my Flawless Conqueror title with pride. Here's a screenshot I captured at the end of the arena when I got it. Elder Scrolls Online is responsible for where I'm at in video games these days. Most of the people I play with I met in-game, and I would never have gotten into 2 other games on this list if it weren't for ESO. It remains an enjoyable experience for me, and I've enjoyed exploring it this year. Celeste is a special game, not because it's a deeply challenging and smooth 2D platformer, but because it's a game about mental health. The main protagonist we play, Madeline, is plagued by anxiety and the fear of failure all throughout the game. The way Celeste approaches its challenges and encourages the player to power through and keep trying is something I've never seen before in a video game. I won't spoil that part of the game for you. It's helpful to experience it for yourself. This game is hard. In fact, I'd say that it's probably the most challenging solo experience on this list. Sure, Elder Scrolls Online has Maelstrom Arena, but once you've beaten Maelstrom Arena and achieved the perfect run, there's nothing else in the game designed as a solo experience that will challenge you. In Celeste, even if you beat the main game, you've got the B-sides of each level, and then the mysterious and legendary C-sides, and then there's the core. Oh, and then the final expansion that was released in the fall of 2019. There's plenty of challenges and mind-blowing platforming to be had in Celeste. And Celeste is doubly special for me because it was the first true platformer I had played in probably over 10 years. In fact, I really can't remember the last one I played, maybe Limbo several years ago, but that's not the same experience, not even close. This is the game that got me into Shovel Knight, and one particular other game that you'll see later on in this video. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I never really knew I enjoyed these types of games. I think in today's video game landscape there is so much emphasis put on multiplayer or co-op or open world games that when we do get a chance to sit down and play a single player game, it's sort of like a breath of fresh air. I first played Celeste early on in 2019 after hearing the soundtrack pop up in one of my Spotify playlists. I honestly thought it was some sort of anime based on the soundtrack album art. Once I googled it though, saw it was a challenging platformer, and remembered that I had actually downloaded it for free with gold, I decided to give it a try. 2,000 and some odd deaths later, I had finally beaten the main story. And you know what? I felt that same joy I felt upon my first Maelstrom clear. I felt that same joy that I felt when I first completed Knights of the Old Republic. The joy that comes from the feeling of accomplishment. It's that classic dopamine rush when all of your previous failures culminate in your eventual success. Celeste may have been released in the past decade, but it's a classic. As I mentioned, I owe Shovel Knight and one other game on this list to Celeste, but really, it springboarded me into an appreciation of indie games, Salt and Sanctuary, which I'll be playing more of in 2020, Dead Cells, which didn't quite make the list this year, and others. In fact, my newfound appreciation for indie titles led me to the next game on this list. If ever there was a game I've played that bridges the gap between my two hobbies, board games and video games, that game is Slay the Spire, a deck-building roguelike video game. It checks the following boxes for me: asymmetrical decks, game-changing power-ups, challenging encounters, score leaderboards, and deck customization. Really, this is the best adaptation of a deck-building game I've ever seen. I've played hours of the Ascension app. I own almost all of DC Deck Builder. I've played Dominion, and I don't really like it. I love Clank in Space, and Flip City was one of my wife and I's earliest game night games early on in our marriage. Slay the Spire nails the deck building feel, but also provides elements that could only exist in a virtual engine. The path you choose to climb the tower in changes every game. The enemies and bosses you fight are randomized, and the text-based encounters can have a myriad of outcomes. All things that would have required pages of explanation or setup in a board game can be easily handled by RNG and code. I guess what I'm trying to say is that instead of a game trying to be both a board game and a video game, Slay the Spire is a board game that has fused with a video game and created the ultimate deck-building experience, especially for those that find themselves in both hobbies. And that's exactly why Slay the Spire has landed itself on this list. It scratches the board game itch I get when life is too busy to allow me to play board games with friends or family. I've really enjoyed every second of Slay the Spire, even in defeat. I can recall one specific enemy that absolutely decimated me my first encounter with it, making me fearful of ever having to encounter it again, and thus ruining a promising run. To try and adapt to such an enemy, I started employing a more defensive build for my deck when I'd start new runs. This worked out great for the short term, but when I encountered the same enemy again, I didn't have enough attack power to finish the job. Slay the Spire teaches you to have a balance in how you build your deck and opens your eyes to card combos during fights to better maximize your hand. This sort of learning experience keeps me engaged in the fun of video games, definitely in a way that board games can't always do. In a year dominated by video games, getting a chance to explore my roots but through the video game medium was exceptionally delightful. I found myself loading up Slay the Spire anytime I had 20 to 30 minutes to spare. Its quick gameplay with the ability to save on any stage at any time made for the perfect filler experience in 2019. And if anyone's curious, Silent is my favorite deck archetype to play. The way you can ramp up poisons all the while maintaining a pretty defense-heavy deck pleases my careful and cautious self. It's such a fun way to play. Slay the Spire will continue to get played in 2020, and I'm sure I'll be enjoying it for months to come, especially when they ever decide to port over the 4th archetype to console. Come on, Megacrit, we're all waiting. Of all the games on this list, Fallout 76 is arguably the worst. It released in a completely bugged out state, has consistent performance issues to this day, and has had more backlash, more angry players, and more negative press than any video game I can remember. I also truly had a fun and enjoyable experience with it this year. A few of us from Lore Seekers had been looking for a different type of open world experience, a world that we could really explore, a world we could inhabit. Truth be told, Fallout 76 does that aspect of the open world experience really well. The West Virginian Appalachia map is a pleasure to explore and provides a solid mix of biomes to explore, from the dense forest region to an irradiated toxic valley, all the way to a living swamp. To this day, Fallout 76 has probably my favorite open world map I've ever explored. This biome variety in concert with the impressively long list of creatures and enemies you can stumble upon means that the world feels alive. Well, as alive as a world can feel post-apocalypse. One fond memory I have playing 76 is when a friend, Timmy Turmoil, relocated his camp near New Gad in the dried-out lake bed. This led to several of us, Jibbs, Arched Beetle, Shiloh, and myself, moving our camps to the lake bed to form a sort of neighborhood. This move introduced CTR into our lives, a Skyrim-turned-Fallout fan. He quickly became one of the boys, and our adventures in the dried-out lake bed continued for a few weeks. And you see, that right there is why 76 is still played by a lot of people. This is why people are still having fun in a game that by all metrics should not be a fun game. It's this community aspect and the idea that I can explore a post-apocalyptic Fallout universe with friends that keeps people engaged. Now, I do have my own issues with the game, namely endgame content. There really isn't any endgame content worth pursuing. In ESO, and the next game on this list, there is so much endgame content to keep you busy that you'll probably never complete it. In 76, well, we got a Vault Raid and the Scorch Beast Queen. At the time of me writing this script, that's it. There is Nuclear Winter, which I suppose could kind of be seen as endgame content, but really very little from Nuclear Winter carries over into the main game. A few housing decorations and probably a lot more that I don't remember, but that's it. There is fantastic lore behind Nuclear Winter though, and if you're curious, you should check out Oxhorn's video on the subject as he covers it exhaustively. And I'd just like to say right now that I had a lot of fun playing Nuclear Winter. It's a really fun battle royale. And honestly, the Fallout universe is the perfect setting for a battle royale. Just duking it out in a post-apocalyptic nuclear wasteland is incredible. But I digress. Aside from overall exploration, Fallout 76 does two specific things extremely well. The first is screenshot mode. This is something that every single open world game, especially those that pride themselves on their gorgeous world, should have. And Fallout 76 takes it a step further by using your photo album photos as your load screens. All those epic moments, maybe the first time you ran into Mothman, or discovering the Interloper's secret lair in Lucky Hole Mine, or that crazy Deathclaw vs. Grafton monster fight. All of these moments will be there for you as you load into various parts of the world. The actual taking of these photos is easy as well. There are a lot of different features built right into the photo mode. You can turn your character off, pull the camera out into third person and free look, and apply filters. It's a little thing I didn't know I was missing from games like Skyrim or Elder Scrolls Online until I got to use it. The second thing Fallout 76 does well is its camp base building. Yeah, there are too many items only available by using the purchasable currency, but that's really the only drawback I've come across. Maybe that and the build limit. The best thing though, you can put your camp and build just about anywhere on the map. The last month of me playing Fallout 76 was spent just trying out different builds in different locations. I did a Under the Bridge build, a Compound Community build, a Cliffside Mansion, and several others. My favorite location to build though is this spot just southeast of White Springs. You have water, a nice cliffside view, and even a Radstag meat spawn. And when I say view, I of course mean a sweet view of someone nuking White Springs. Fallout 76 is a far from great game. It's got a ton of issues, and I'm hoping that the Wastelanders update really revitalizes the game. Until then, I'm content playing other titles. I had a ton of fun in this game this year, made some great friends, and really enjoyed my time surviving in post-apocalyptic Appalachia. But sometimes, it's time to move on.
The Interloper is here. I can feel it clearly. Last night, in visions more real than the senses, it called to me, and I go to it now. Signs are all around that I am not the only...
And move on I did, straight to Destiny 2. If any game on the market had the ability to bring together what I loved in ESO and what I felt I was longing for in Fallout 76, it was Destiny 2. And it delivered. This is also the game that I mentioned had been stealing the show from Borderlands 3. It must be that sweet, sweet PvP.
That was all of them!
I believe Bungie recently, as of Shadowkeep, has finally admitted that D2 is an MMO. My ESO-loving self was able to connect quickly with the loot collection, the min-max nature of gear, traits, getting good rolls, and triumph chasing. Oh, and questing and bounty grinding, and the lore. Now, I'm no expert on Destiny lore, but I spent several hours listening to podcasts or YouTube videos delving deep into the lore of the world Bungie had created. And I gotta say, it's fantastic stuff. Now, I'm not a huge sci-fi geek outside of the Star Wars IP, but Destiny really helped me broaden my interests. I'm fully invested in the story of Destiny 2, but overall, the story of that universe as a whole. From the opening of the Red War story all the way to the tragic opening of the Forsaken DLC and beyond, there's a lot to digest and experience. My favorite race is probably the Hive. I did have a brief 3-week experience with Destiny 1 right after The Dark Below came out. Experiencing the moon and trying to solo Crota's End completely unprepared and ignorant of what I was getting myself into was a lot of fun. In the lore, the Hive adhere to the sword logic, which is basically the following, taken from the Destinypedia page. The central tenet of the sword logic is that existence is the struggle to exist. and that any entity, whether a life form or a fundamental aspect of nature which cannot protect itself against defeat, should rightfully be destroyed by a more powerful entity. It's an interesting philosophy and adds a bit of complexity to their hell-bent desire to destroy humanity. I do also love the Fallen. To once be chosen by the Traveler and blessed by the Age of Enlightenment it brought to their civilization, only for the Traveler to leave and abandon them, is a tragic tale. And I guess justification for their hatred towards the human race, the Traveler's now chosen last bastion of hope for the light. Enough of that in the weeds lore stuff, let's talk about the game. I've enjoyed all aspects of Destiny 2 so far. The story, Gambit, the Crucible, what little bit of Leviathan I saw. It's all so masterfully crafted. Each planet is unique enough to visually inspire awe. Especially this Vex Milk waterfall.
Oh, look, it's a Vex Milk waterfall. Can we stop and... Aw.
Even the beginning of the Leviathan raid, when you get to take in just the sheer size of Emperor Callus's ship, it's incredible. Bungie did an incredible job displaying the breadth of the world and set pieces they created. My favorite planet or moon is definitely Titan. It's completely underutilized in the game, but the opening mission back when the Red War campaign would take you there was eerily similar to the first time you meet the Flood in Halo Combat Evolved. I'm not sure how it's introduced these days, as Bungie has changed the flow of the game by having everyone start at 750 power instead of having to grind out power and levels through the campaign. Oh well, I got to experience it, and it really gave me a love for those roaring seas and the abandoned drilling, mining, oiling facility. Please, Bungie, give Titan some love in the future. I mentioned above that I moved on to Destiny 2 from Fallout 76, and I owe that one to Timmy Turmoil, a friend I met through the Lore Seekers. Timmy was an early pioneer of Fallout 76 in the Wisdom for Wizards community, and really, he's probably responsible for keeping all of us interested in that game as well. Once he moved into Destiny 2 though, and after I did a bit of research, I knew I'd get hooked. Those early days of grouping up for the Crucible or for strikes or even our first big attempt at the Leviathan was a blast. Destiny 2 was designed to be played and enjoyed with people, and doing so makes the game memorable. I'll never forget Shiloh, Timmy and I's jaunts through the haunted forest for the Halloween event, or one particular Crucible match where Timmy opened the match with a triple kill. I have a lot of great memories and endearing experiences with Destiny 2. It was the game that really pulled me out of my mindless wandering amongst the game titles in my virtual library. I'm equally excited and looking forward to continuing my journey as a Guardian in 2020.
The route is on! Finish it! Double down. Zone C lost.
If I'm being truly honest, of all of the games on this list, Life is Strange and Life is Strange Before the Storm have probably impacted me the most. I'm grouping both of these together because really, Before the Storm is just a continuation of the experience that is Life is Strange. When I sat down to originally type my thoughts towards Life is Strange, it was 2 a.m. I had just finished the first game and was filled with emotion. Then, when I started Before the Storm, I realized what I was in for, and well, I can say that no other game experience has really went straight for my heart like that. If you know me in person, know who I am, what my interests are, you might be able to understand why Life is Strange had the impact it did. I'm the type of guy that teared up at, spoiler alert, Han Solo's death in The Force Awakens. I'm the type of guy that teared up when I finished the final Harry Potter novel for the first time. My Sister's Keeper is the saddest movie I've ever watched. You get the picture. There's a lot of depth of emotion inside me, despite what my voice might portray. Life is Strange really feeds on that emotion. Yeah, I'm not and never have been a teenage girl, but I was a teenager once. I was what I'd consider an outcast in high school, much like Chloe or Max. I've had friends who left me, left our friendship. I've also experienced significant family trauma, though not loss like Chloe has. In an odd sort of way, Life is Strange is relatable because other than Max's ability to rewind time, it's really down to earth. There's nothing crazy supernatural happening. It's all real-world problems and issues that the characters are dealing with. And maybe that's also why the characters themselves feel so believable. The game really sort of tricks you into believing that these characters, Max, Chloe, Nathan, Victoria, Rachel, Amber, that they are all real. I know, it sounds silly coming from a grown man, but really, when I finished both games, I felt like I had lost someone I knew well. Maybe not quite like losing someone through death, but more like losing a good friend through distance or just a lack of continuation of experiences. You see, I read a wise quote once that was something along the lines of, "Friendships fade when you stop making memories together." And that feeling of no ill will or no falling out, just a simple halt in the production of memories together. That feeling is how it feels when Life is Strange comes to a close. I guess I have to mention that as much as I loved Life is Strange, I think Before the Storm was a more impactful story. Again, that's my personal opinion. I definitely see how the main game can be impactful and heart-wrenching. But Before the Storm, and I did play it after I played the first game, really hit me in the feels. I think a lot of that has to do with Rachel Amber. You see, she is very much a character that I could have seen myself falling for had she been a real person that walked the halls of my high school. She is artsy, clever, sassy, and cute. Yes, I know we're talking about a video game character, just suspend disbelief or something and stay with me here. Rachel Amber carries the story of Before the Storm, and since we play as Chloe, a hopeless romantic, clearly in love with Rachel, it really drives home the Chloe we see in Life is Strange. There is one scene in particular at the start of the 3rd episode of Before the Storm where the song All I Wanted by Daughter plays. It really is an incredible moving point in Rachel and Chloe's relationship. I know, I'm not really talking about Life is Strange or Before the Storm as games. I haven't mentioned their mechanics, how they play, etc. Honestly, I don't really want to. Yeah, they are video games, but they are more experiences than anything. If you have the capacity to really dig into your own emotions, open yourself up to a narrative that doesn't hold any punches, I think you'll get the same experience out of Life is Strange that I got. I think I best stop this monologue here. You see, I'm actually working on a Life is Strange thoughts video, and I don't want to unpack all my thoughts in this video. I'd rather save them for when I can really explore them. Life is Strange was an unforgettable experience. That's really the best way to sum it up.
To say that I'll be alright.
From the opening title screen, you get a sense that Hollow Knight is special. Special because its music isn't all that bombastic or in your face, but rather calm, serene, and ominous. Special because the artwork is not really representative of anything you've played before, rich in contrast, somewhat simple in style, but with a handcrafted quality to it. And yes, the artwork in Hollow Knight was indeed painstakingly handcrafted. The second best game I've played in 2019, Hollow Knight is on the surface a 2D platformer. But when you really dive in, however, you'll quickly find yourself in a world as compelling as some of the best AAA games out there. I love this game. No, really, Hollow Knight single-handedly opened my eyes to what a 2D platformer could actually be. Now, I mentioned in my Celeste commentary that it was responsible for getting me into 2D platformers, and that is valid, but consider this. Let's say you have a friend who is brand new to the world of desserts. Yes, I'm talking about sweets. For whatever reason, this friend grew up and was never able to partake in any decadent chocolate confections or moist cake with chocolate icing. Yes, I said moist. This is my video. I can say moist if I want to. Anyway, this friend who never has had dessert decides one day he or she is going to eat a bowl of Neapolitan ice cream. That will represent Celeste in this analogy. It's got great flavor, a complexity of flavor too if you eat more than one of the 3 flavors at the same time, but overall it's just a bowl of ice cream. Then, down the road, after eating ice cream for weeks and weeks, this friend learns of something called an Oreo brownie earthquake from Dairy Queen. It blows his or her mind. They never realized dessert could be such a wonderful experience, all that melty chocolate fudge, the warm and soft brownie, the Oreo crumble. Amazing. Now, that's essentially what Hollow Knight was for me. It blew my mind. Here was a game with all the breadth and possibilities of something of a AAA title. The world is both eerie and interesting. Eerie in the sense that you're sort of exploring a Bug's Life apocalypse, and interesting in the sense that there are so many little hidden paths, side paths, unique enemies, that there is something catching your eye often. And that's just the visual side of things. Mechanically, Hollow Knight is sound. The charm system is fantastic. Each feels valuable on its own right, but I quickly found that I loved the fast-paced combat. My charm loadout then became a method of maximizing my nail damage along with my nail art abilities. The great thing though is that you can build your charm loadout in many different ways, especially once you've gotten all the charm notches. Even platforming feels smooth and responsive. The longer you hold down your jump button, the higher your little knight jumps. You can pogo or nail bounce spikes or other dangers, and once you've gotten all the upgrades, this world of platforming opens even further. Progression is not as apparent as it is in modern games where a quest marker holds your hand all the way through. In Hollow Knight, you have to find your own path with a vague understanding of your ultimate goal. This is fine though, because the secret to Hollow Knight's success is its exploration. The world is massive. For a $15 game, you'd maybe expect to get 5 to 10 hours out of it and been able to experience everything in every place the world has to offer. No, I spent 60 hours in my first playthrough, and yes, that included the first major DLC, the Grim Troop, but for a 2D platformer, that's an incredible cost to entertainment ratio. I spent hours exploring every nook and cranny of Hollow Knight's dynamic and expansive map. Not only did I uncover many secrets on my own, but even when I felt I had seen it all, and I took to the Hollow Knight wiki for more tidbits of information, I discovered even more things that I had missed. Hollow Knight is an evergreen game for me, to borrow board game lingo. It's going to remain on the list of my favorite games of all time for a very long time. Perhaps forever. It's really that good. Team Cherry really did create a special experience for gamers, and I await Silksong, the follow-up game to Hollow Knight, eagerly and with much excitement.
People, Geralt turned his head, like to invent monsters and monstrosities. They seem less monstrous themselves. When they get blind drunk, cheat, steal, beat their wives, starve an old woman, when they kill a trapped fox with an axe or riddle the last existing unicorn with arrows. They like to think that the Bane entering cottages at daybreak is more monstrous than they are. They feel better then. They find it easier to live.
This is one of my favorite quotes, not from a game, but from the book series that inspired perhaps one of the greatest video games I have ever played. It sums up quite nicely the reality in every quest Geralt of Rivia undertakes in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, where people are just as dangerous as the Leshen or Fiend terrorizing the Velen countryside. You see, The Witcher 3 manages to do what no other game at the same size and scope has been able to do before. Keep me entertained and on the edge of my seat for over 90 hours, and that's just the base game. It's hard to put into words just how great The Witcher 3 is. As someone who never played the first two games, I had absolutely zero experience with being a witcher, wooing sorceresses and saving Dandelion from another ill fate. My experience didn't stop there. I've slayed griffins, wyverns, werewolves, higher vampires, sylvans, moonwraiths, and lots of men. You see, Geralt keeps 2 swords, steel for humans and silver for monsters. There are tangible reasons why The Witcher 3 is a fantastic game. It has a breathtaking open world, meaningful characters, compelling narratives, a robust crafting system, intelligent and unique combat, a magnificent soundtrack, Gwent.
What would you say to a few rounds of Gwent?
Yeah, Gwent. And I'll be honest, I've barely scratched the surface with Gwent, and the reason for that is because I will never even finish the main game if I spend time trying to master Gwent. It's a well-thought-out minigame inside a game that is already full of fun and interesting content. CD Projekt Red really outdid themselves with this one. But The Witcher 3 really goes beyond those things. It really reminds me of my time as a young kid when playing a game like Pokemon Red or Star Wars Jedi Power Battles or Mega Man Battle Network would transcend the cartridge or disc it was living on. When my friends and I would take our love and enjoyment for the game we were all playing and turn it into a lifestyle, acting out the game in real life with toys or even wanting to wear clothes and get haircuts that resembled our favorite characters. Nope, I'm not off to the barber to dye my hair white or off to my local blacksmith. I don't even know any blacksmiths, to have a steel sword made specially for me. It doesn't elicit a childish response, but rather it touches that inner kid, that inner imagination in a way very few games or IPs manage to do these days. Call it nostalgia without the actual thing even being a product of nostalgia. Maybe the best way to describe it is this. No other game or movie since Star Wars and possibly Halo has compelled me to buy books written in the same fictional universe. The Witcher series is the first series since Halo, and I'm talking OG Halo like Combat Evolved or Halo 2, where I now own and have read several of the books. And despite the video games not being technically canon, their setting along the timeline is well enough into the future that I can read both books and play the game and feel like I'm experiencing one massive, cohesive world. And that's the point I'm trying to get across. I want to experience this world and this universe. In not quite as real of a way as with Life is Strange, I feel like this world and characters have been truly brought to life. If you're a fan of any of the Witcher games and you haven't read the books, you really ought to. They bring to life so many of the things only touched on in the games. I would find myself reading about a character and then, upon learning their name, having a wonderful aha moment as I realized who it was in the context of the video game. Since the release of the Netflix series, the popularity of the IP has grown immensely. In my opinion, they did a fantastic job giving life to these characters, especially Henry Cavill as Geralt. Yennefer and Jaskier, Dandelion in the games or English books, were also brilliant, as was Ciri. With that said, if you watched the show and enjoyed it, well, even more reason to pick up the book series and give it a read. It has all of the gritty adult themes that make the game so interesting as a grown man. Oh, and the humor. Let me read this one little part in Baptism of Fire. It takes place while Geralt and Dandelion are running from pursuers as arrows rain down around them. The Witcher felt something warm dripping onto his neck. "Hold on," he shouted, catching the poet by his elbow and drawing him closer to his own back. "Hold on, Dandelion." "They've killed me," the poet howled, impressively loudly for a dead man. "I'm bleeding! I'm dying!" Now, maybe it's just me, but that type of humor, especially in books, really just speaks to my soul. I know this is a video about video games, not books, and I've been going on and on about the book series, but rest assured when I say that the video games also have that same sense of humor, maybe even more so. It's simple, really. The Witcher 3 is the best game I played in 2019, and quite frankly, possibly the best game I have ever played. It is undoubtedly the best fantasy RPG I've ever played. Its ability to capture my attention, keep me entertained nearly 100 hours later, and make me care about the most trivial of side quests is a rarity among games in this day and age. I'm not sure I will ever have the honor of playing another game quite like it. What's that? Cyberpunk 2077 comes out in 2020? Here we go again. Well, I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be honest, I love doing lists like this. I do so for my board game collection. I did so when I was a Magic the Gathering player. I've done one for my top 10 animated movies. I don't know, I'm just a weird list guy. No matter, this was a lot of fun to put together, and I enjoyed the chance to be able to reflect on the experiences I had this year in video games. I wanted to briefly mention some games I played in 2019 that didn't quite make this list. First, Outer Worlds. I played about an hour of it and then put it on hold so I could focus on finishing The Witcher 3. I like Outer Worlds and I'm excited to play it in 2020. I just didn't get to properly experience it this year. I'm a big fan of Fallout and New Vegas is my favorite Fallout for narrative, so I know I'll be in for a treat with The Outer Worlds. Dead Cells. I really enjoy Dead Cells, but I spent too much time on Slay the Spire, Celeste, Hollow Knight, and Shovel Knight. It's a great game and it deserves a more complete look, so I'll also be playing this title in 2020. Overwatch. I think my time with Overwatch has run its course. Overwatch was the first game I bought for the Xbox One, and I spent the next year and a half pretty much only playing Overwatch. I owe a lot of my current gaming friendships to this game, and also my revitalized love for FPS games. Finally, Apex Legends and Fortnite. I'm grouping these two together because they do the same thing, really. 2018 was the year that I dedicated at least 500 hours to Fortnite. I actually ended 2018 and started 2019 in a match of Fortnite with my good friend Caleb, and we actually won that match. It was a great way to start the year. 2019 was the fall of Fortnite from my regular rotation of games. Frankly, I just can't compete with the insane builders that play the game day in and day out. Apex, though still entertaining, just doesn't have the same charm that Fortnite originally had. I mean, everyone was playing Fortnite. I could hop on the Xbox and have 20 or so Xbox friends in Fortnite at any given time in late 2018. Both games are great at what they do, and I do have some fond memories playing them in 2019. I hope your year was as fulfilling as mine was in this entertainment medium, and I think we've got a lot of great stuff coming to consumers in 2020. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving me the old thumbs up and maybe the honor of a subscription. I'd like to do more videos like this one or something similar that is long form. A like and a subscribe go a long way in showing your appreciation for my content. Also, if you'd like to join in on the conversation about this video or about games in general, you can do so in two ways. You can leave me a comment on this video, or you can join my Discord server and jump into the community there. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Well, that about covers it, so thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Take care.